Quebec 1759 is a simple game with a surprising amount of strategic depth. It's an oldie but goodie, and I think you'll want to hang around and learn how to play here today on Legendary Tactics. First of all, let's take a look at the map board. There are 10 zones, which are land areas on the map. They are Montmorency, Beauport, St. Charles, Abraham, Sainte-Foy, Cap Rouge, Sillery, Etchemin, Lévis, and Ile d'Orléans. There are 2 sea areas where the St. Lawrence River is divided approximately in the middle of the board. These areas are named Bazon and Saint Laurent. There are 2 factions, the British and the French, and each side has 25 units representing their forces. Each unit has a combat value, which is represented by the pips at the top of the block. Every unit begins at full strength with a maximum number of pips at the top. As units lose combat strength, the block is rotated to reflect this, lowering the number of pips at the top. This is called step reduction. Any unit reduced to less than 1 pip is eliminated. Before orders are revealed for any particular move, players can transfer combat strength between units that are in the same zone if they like. Each unit stands on edge except ships, with the identifications facing the owning player, so an opponent does not know what the strength of the opposing force might be. This is to recreate the fog of war. Ships are generally never placed this way and are placed instead on the board flat and face up. However, in this tabletop simulator module, I can't lay the ships down, so you'll have to assume that any unit in the middle of the water is a ship. Setup is very simple. The British player puts all their units on the Ile d'Orléans space and all ships in Bazon. The French player deploys their units any way they like among the remaining 9 land zones. There are 16 moves called campaign moves in the game. Each player can take one of a land move, a ship move, or an amphibious move each turn. Also, players can choose not to do anything during a given turn. Each move is written down and is revealed simultaneously. When units of each opposing player end up in the same zone, a battle occurs. This is resolved before the next campaign move. For the British to win, they have to control the Abraham land zone at the end of the 16th or last campaign move, and after all battles have been resolved. If you get there earlier than that, it's not a British victory, at least not yet. The British must also have a minimum of 20 combat value or total pips on the board, although they don't all need to be in the Abraham zone. The French player wins if they prevent this. Either they can prevent British control of Abraham at the end of the 16th campaign turn, or they can do enough damage so the British have less than 20 total combat value or pips on the board at any time during the game. There are no ties. A land move is made from one zone to another along a connecting road. All the units in that zone are called a group, and only one group can move per turn. As long as everything is connected, a group can split up and move to one or more adjacent zones. You don't have to move every unit in the group if you don't want to. An amphibious move is when units move from zone to zone across one of the 2 river areas. Ile d'Orléans, Lévis, Beauport, St. Charles, and Montmorency all border on the Bazon River area. All the other zones except for Sainte-Foy, which is landlocked, border on the Saint Laurent River area. Please note that Quebec City is not a zone, and Abraham does not border on the Bazon River area. Amphibious moves happen when units go from one zone to another zone, which are in the same river area. These moves don't have to be adjacent, as long as they border on the appropriate river zone. The British ships determine how many units of either side can move this way. The French can never use amphibious movement in the Bazon area. They can move a maximum of 4 units across the Saint Laurent River area. This maximum decreases by 1 unit for every British naval unit located in the Saint Laurent area. If the British move all 4 ships there, the French cannot use amphibious movement anymore. The British can move 1 army unit amphibiously for every naval unit in that area. For example, here, the British can move 2 units amphibiously to, say, Montmorency because they have 2 Navy units in the Bazon River Zone. If it's possible, a player can move some units amphibously and others along the roads as land movement as part of the same turn, as long as they're originally in the same zone. In order to move ships, the British player must use their campaign move to move a maximum of 2 ships upriver from Bazon to Saint Laurent, or as many ships as they like downriver in the opposite direction. Army units cannot accompany this movement. Each turn, each player secretly writes down their orders of which units are to move, and once revealed they cannot be changed and must be carried out. If a move is impossible, none of the units move. These orders are written down as 6 units from Saint-Foy to Abraham and 3 units to Cap Rouge, or 2 units from Ile d'Orléans to Beauport. But at the time the units are actually moved, the player may decide which units actually do end up moving. In addition, both sides have 1 leader each. The French have Montcalm and the British have Wolfe. These units function in the same way as infantry units, except a leader can move 1 or 2 zones by land movement, and a leader deployed in battle rolls 2 dice each firing turn, but is killed if doubles are thrown. For example, double 6 scores 2 hits, but the leader is also killed. Whenever opposing units meet in the same zone, a battle occurs and must be resolved before the next campaign move. This can happen when one player moves units to a zone that already contains enemy units. In this case, the player with the units already in the zone is the defender. Battles can also happen if both players move units to the same empty zone. In that case, the French is always the defender. The other time battles can happen is when both players move to the zone each is moving from. For example, British units in Lévis move to Etimin, and the French move from Etimin to Lévis. In this case, the battle is fought in the zone from which the weaker force came, measured in units, not pips, or, if both forces are equal, in the zone of the French player's choice. The defender is the player who controlled that zone at the start of the turn. 2 or more battles in different zones can occur at the same time, and in that case the French player decides in which order the battles will be fought. No reinforcements allowed. Units can't move during the battle phase. To deploy units in battle, first of all the defender divides his force into 3 columns without revealing the combat values of any of the units involved. There can be any number of units in a column, but there must be at least 1 unit in each column. In addition, you can keep any number of units in reserve behind your columns. We'll touch on that later. Now the attacker deploys units in the zone where the battle is occurring in 3 opposing columns with the same guidelines as previously mentioned. I'm illustrating this here off the board so I have enough space. The attacker can have a reserve as well. The defender cannot make any changes to their setup. Now both players reveal the combat values of the units deployed in the columns by tilting them forward so that the current combat values of the units face the opposing columns. Keep your reserve units hidden for now. In this example, I've just turned the pieces around so they face the same way. You get the idea. Once the battle starts, you can't redeploy units in the columns, but you can move 1 unit from your reserve to any column per battle turn, as we will explain in a minute. Follow this procedure to resolve a battle. First of all, the defender has the option to retreat. This is done before firing any units for that particular round. The defenders can't retreat until the beginning of their second battle turn, and the attackers can retreat at the beginning of their first battle turn if they like. Next, the defender may add 1 unit from the reserve, if any, to any one column. Then the defender may fire all units in the 3 columns, 1 unit at a time, 1 column at a time, in any desired order.
Only units deployed in the battle columns may fire, and any units in the reserve cannot fire or be fired at. Units in each column must always fire at units in the opposing column, except during pursuit fire after the enemy is routed. To fire, for each unit, simply roll 1 die per combat value pip, and each 6 rolled is a hit. This immediately reduces a unit in the opposite enemy column by 1 combat value, and the owner decides which unit or units are reduced. The hits can be divided up between different units as desired. The attacker then repeats these steps in the same sequence, first choosing to retreat or not, adding a unit for reserves, and firing units. The sequence is repeated until one player decides to retreat or until one player is routed. After a battle, any surviving unit blocks are stood up again to hide them from your opponent's view, maintaining whatever current combat value levels they may have at that time. If a player wishes to retreat from battle, they have to do it before firing any units that turn. All units must be retreated at the same time, and all units must retreat to the same zone. Defending units can be retreated to any zone except a zone occupied by enemy units or the zone the attacker came from, even if it is now empty. Attacking units can only be retreated to the zone they came from as long as it isn't occupied by enemy units. Neither player can retreat to a zone that contains an unresolved battle. If there's no legal path to retreat, that player has to stick it out and remain in battle until one side is routed. When the units in any one column are eliminated, that player is outflanked and is routed. Any additional hits on that column have no effect. A player who is routed must immediately retreat subject to the rules of retreat. If units are not able to retreat legally, they are eliminated. Before the retreat is complete, the victorious player is given 1 additional fire by all units, including reserve units, to represent pursuit fire. Any casualties are taken on any units the routed player wishes. If the routed player has units in reserve when the rout occurs, 1 pursuit fire hit is ignored for each 2 combat value pips that are there, rounded up. When a player attacks by sea move, which is called amphibious combat, the defender in the battle or skirmish fires each of the deployed units at double combat value, as long as none of the defending units also did a sea move in the same turn. In other words, they roll double the number of dice for the first battle turn, which represents the difficulty of landing an attacking force by sea against a defensive position. After that, the normal battle procedure is followed. A player can retreat by amphibious movement, but the number of retreating units obviously cannot exceed the maximum allowed for a legal amphibious move. In addition, as you know, a normal retreat results in pursuit fire from the victorious player. In this case, an amphibious retreat, if a rout occurs, the victorious player conducts pursuit fire with double the amount of combat value. In other words, with double the normal amount of dice used in pursuit fire. If one or both players has less than 3 units in a battle zone, columns cannot be utilized. In this case, players deploy their units in a single skirmish column and exchange fire as usual. Retreats are conducted as before, but there's no rout and no pursuit fire unless an amphibious retreat is involved. I also like to use a house rule variant here. I typically play that only the units immediately facing each other can exchange fire and have to show their combat values. I think this helps to maintain the fog of war and to prevent a small force from scouting and getting a glimpse of the entire enemy army to inform later moves by that player. It also allows players to bluff, as a force might be stronger or weaker than what the player chooses to show the other. We are almost done learning how to play. There are just a few more special rules to learn now. The St. Charles River was a great line of defense, so every move across it to Abraham is considered to be an amphibious attack or retreat, with no limit on how many units may cross. Quebec militia were prone to desertion, and any threat to their farms threatened their loyalty to the cause. To reflect this, the French player must remove any one Quebec militia unit of any combat value every time the British player occupies a new land zone for the first time. Ile d'Orléans obviously doesn't count here. This loss is effective immediately as long as there are Quebec militia in play.
The French depended on the flow of supplies from Montreal. If the British player occupies the Cap Rouge zone at the end of every campaign move except the move that captured Cap Rouge, the French player must eliminate any one Montreal or Trois-Rivières militia until there are none left in play or Cap Rouge is recaptured by the French. Finally, the green unit represents Native Canadians, Ottawa warriors that supported the French. They operate according to some special rules. If the French player wishes to move the Ottawa warriors, this is the only order that can be written this turn. The Ottawa unit can then move to any zone on the map board without restriction. The unit can then either raid or scout. A raid can be done in the destination zone by immediately attacking units there at double combat value, and then immediately retreating to any zone not occupied by British units or a battle zone. The British player can only return fire with light infantry or American Ranger units if they are present. Casualties inflicted by the Ottawa unit may be taken on units of the British player's choice, and the British player only needs to reveal the units that are reduced. If the French player decides to scout the destination zone, the French player reveals up to 4 British units in the zone. The Ottawa unit cannot be attacked and, after scouting, retreats to any zone that is not occupied by the British, nor is a battle zone. If caught in a battle, the Ottawa unit cannot be deployed in a battle column. It must be kept in reserve but gets double combat value pursuit fire in routes. If it is caught in a skirmish, it can be used and fights at a single combat value, but never by itself. If it retreats, the Ottawa unit may retreat to any zone and is never subject to pursuit fire. If the Ottawa unit is ever reduced to 1 combat value, or if the total French strength on the board falls below 10 combat value total, the Ottawa unit is retired from the game immediately, even if it's in the middle of a battle or skirmish. Finally, as an optional rule, players can decide to add tides to the equation. These were extremely inconvenient to military planning, and so before every campaign move, if a 1 is thrown, amphibious movement and the movement of ships is not allowed for that campaign move for either player. This is how you play Quebec 1759, a great old game published by Columbia Games. We hope you found this rules walkthrough useful and interesting, and if you did, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe down below. Thank you so much for watching. This is NATO with Legendary Tactics.